Instantly improve your digital drawings, especially for your characters, with these fire art tips. I'm just going to be showing you guys how to draw your characters digitally, at least with my approach, step by step, showing you all the little tricks here and there designed to get your drawing feeling a little more dynamic, feeling a little more alive, feeling and looking more professional. It's really a combination of things that could apply to any art software. It doesn't matter what art software you're using. First step, you want to think in layers, you want to go step by step and not overwhelm your brain with a bunch of things, thinking of all of them at the same time. You want to go easy, easy, easy. First thing, you figure out the pose in really basic, rough sketches. Then you reduce the opacity, and then above it, you have a more detailed version on a new layer. Here, we're just going in a little more detail with the character design. Not completely final, but just showing more detail, like say the clothing or hair, or whatever you want to go with, while also making maybe a few alterations here and there to adjust the pose, making it a little more anatomically accurate. Just adding better details and making edits here and there to make it look better. Next up, you add your inking lines. Now the inking lines here, I'm going with your typical usual black, even though we'll do some editing to that eventually once we start coloring. But for now, I'm just going in with black. It could be whatever you want to go with, depending on your art style, so you can use whatever brush you would like to use. Bottom line is, get your line work. I have several videos that touch on this as well if you want extra help. So scour the channel, but based off of the sketch layer, you now want to form your more defined lines. Then you want to fill in the color flats. So essentially new layers for the colors where you're just filling in the spaces you've created from the line. Here we're going to focus a little bit more on just this head. So we select the part of the head that we want to fill in. We create a new layer for the color, in this case red. We expand that selection so we get all the nooks and crannies the selection can't quite get to, and then Alt Delete for fill, or you find whatever the fill button is for the art software you're using and you fill it in. If there are still spots you don't get, you can just go manually and fill those in with your brush. And then you create each layer for each color and you fill in accordingly. I put all my hues of red on one layer, all my hues of whatever on their own separate layer. That way I stay organized. But there are people who organize their layers differently. Say you have a layer for hair, or a layer for skin, or a layer for whatever. You can have as many layers as you want, whatever works for you. I tend to gather all my flats and put them in one folder just to stay organized. You don't have to do that, but that's just what I do. You can see here I have chosen a light blue color, and then I'm filling in parts of the drawing where I know I'm going to have a glow with it, and that's under effects. So effects go a long way into making your illustration look top-notch, right? Depending on what software you're using, you can manually do that by having a separate layer and going with an airbrush over it or under the part that you've covered that you want to glow, and just using that airbrush to make it feel like it glowed, playing with the opacity and the blending mode. But here you can double click on the layer in the layer window and it will open up effects. And then under effects, it'll give you all these options to add a stroke to it. That's basically like an outline. It'll show you how you can add an outer glow, which is a literal glow, or inner glow where it's glowing but it's glowing in the opposite direction, and so much more. A drop shadow, the list goes on. And I recommend you play with these heavily. You click on one, it toggles it on, and then you have options to play with. You can play with the blending mode of it, you can play with the opacity, you can play with so much. Here I have the stroke on for a blue that's just slightly darker than the original blue on the layer. And then I have the outer glow on with the settings to what I want. It's hard to see because of the white background, so to see it clearer, I'm going to create a new layer and just put it underneath the ink layer and the glow layer, just to show you exactly what's going on a little better. And yeah, I recommend you play with these because the glow definitely makes things pop. For shading and setting the mood, this is where things get a little tricky. On this layer that we've called shade, I have the opacity below 50%. And then I've picked a color that's a warm color, right? And that's going to be based off of where this character is going to be placed, because there's no background. It's almost like the character has been placed in this white void. So it's not really going to mess with the character as much. However, the character is holding a flaming sword, which we will get to towards the end of this video. That's going to bring about a lot of warmth. And so for the shading, I've picked a warm color. You want to pick something to the extreme right, in the middle, and then kind of warm, like an orange. Now, if we were in a cold place, you'd probably want to pick something cooler, right? Maybe I can make a video specifically on that because it is a little tricky. But just for simplicity's sake, I'll try to simplify things, right? If the character was in a blue, cold place, then we'll probably want to stick with blue colors, right? Or if they're in a blue, very cold place, but it's nighttime and then they're close to a fire, then it'll kind of look warm again. So it's tricky, but just try to hang on as best as you can and maybe follow me step by step in the video. So this shade layer, I've picked the color I want, opacity below 50, and then blending mode, linear burn. Some people use multiply, some people do overlay, but I like to use linear burn, especially for cases like this. Changing the blending mode of a layer can really make things pop, and you will see cases where we do that here and there. So keep an eye out for that. So far, key things is understanding your layers, understanding blending modes, making use of the opacity, and playing around with the effects on the layers. There's still more adjustment layers and filters and so on that really help your characters and your illustrations pop, but we'll get to those. Once I have the setting for the shading where I want it to be, I'm just kind of filling in the spots on the character where I want filled in. You don't necessarily need your flats turned on to make this work. In some cases, having them turned off while you do this could make it easier. One trick I'm doing to speed time is I'm just using the lines to form the parts that I want filled in. And because the layer has enough contrast, I can just take a magic wand and select the parts that I want filled in. Just select them, expand the selection by maybe 1 or 2 pixels, and then Alt-Delete on Photoshop and even in Clip Studio Paint to fill. Or you could just manually fill them in with your brush. Up to you. The brush you use, also up to you. A lot of this kind of gives room for you to insert your art style, whatever that may be. After that, I have another layer similar to the shade layer, but this time it covers the whole character, not just parts. And the opacity is much lower, say at best 15%, maybe even 10%. Again, because of the warm surrounding of the character. I call that the mood layer, and that just goes over everything. Then I have another layer, this time a different color that's more in tune with the light source, and in this case the light source is going to be the fire. Instead of middle extreme right, I've gone for something a little more yellow, less orange, the middle upwards, and a little bit to the left where things look a little brighter. The opacity here is reduced drastically as well. You can do 20%. Overall, opacities depend on how intense you want them to be. So you can use your eyes to gauge that. In this case, the head is really close to it. In fact, the whole character is going to be really close to that fire source. So, the opacity could be high. It depends. You can look at it, eyeball it, and see what works for you. Same with the color. The blending mode here, you can do an add or a linear dodge or an add glow if you're Clip Studio Paint. But here, I'm trying a color dodge, see how it looks. If I like it, I keep it. And then I go over the character in parts that I want that light source to hit. And I call that layer highlights. After that, I turn on all the other layers, the glow layer and all of that, and see how everything looks. And so far, it's looking good. There are other things, like I said, adjustment layers. You have curves, gradient map, selective color, the list goes on. Understanding how to use adjustment layers go a long way as well, but here we're just going to be using the selective color. If you don't see any of these windows, just hit window at the top, and then it'll drop down a bunch of windows that you can turn on, and just look for adjustment layers and it'll turn that on. At least that's how it's done in Photoshop. Once you have that turned on, you look for selective color, you hit that, and then it gives you this option. You change it from red to black, and then reduce the black bar, and then mess with the others. Here I'm just going to mess with the magenta and the yellow, and that makes all the hues of black on the drawing feel less flat black and more yellowy, more magenta-y, making the black lines feel a little warmer, again, more in tune with what we're going for. Up next is the fire, and I'm just going to create a new layer, call it fire, look for something really bright orange or bright red, whatever, something in that, and then create like a very fiery outline of where I want the fire to be. Then I select within it on a separate layer, I fill those in, and then I just start using the airbrush or just getting a brush of your choice to play around with it with darker oranges, darker yellows, brighter yellows, and just forming that fire, right? Towards the edge, be unpredictable with your strokes, kind of like actual fire. Increase the saturation of the orange if you want, whatever you feel works best. And you can see the colors I'm using. In fact, you can use reference. I'm also using layer effects with the inner glow, outer glow, you know, so you can see the fire emitting heat. Again, it's a little harder to see because of the white background, but you just kind of keep playing with it until you get the desired effect. And this is a combination of reference, it's a combination of playing around with the colors and doing some brushes, having a strong understanding of the effects and how layers are placed, and just having a blast. Once I'm done with the yellows and the oranges, I have something white in there, and then I might go in with an airbrush on a separate layer above it to do some things manually, and then reduce the opacity of just that. I still have the whole thing selected, that way whatever I do within the space I've drawn for that fire is still within that, so it's still selected, so anything I draw is not going out of the selection. It's really up to you how you put that together, and as you can see, it's already starting to feel like fire. And then I tend to give the outline the same effects with the outer glow and the inner glow that I did for the insides. And you can actually copy effects. If you right click on the layer, you'll see a part. If you right click on the layer, it'll give you an option to copy layer style. And then you go to the layer you want to paste it to, and you'll find you right click on that layer and it'll give you paste layer style. That way you don't have to go layer by layer trying to get the same effect. You can literally copy and paste effects. So the fire is just a combination of all of that until you get it to look how you want it to look. I even have a separate layer where I copy the same effects to, as you can see, and I just manually throw in some particles to make the scene feel a little more alive. This is the part where you start to throw in more filters. So what I'm going to do is, since I have the particles, right, even though they have an effect to them, I just go on the layers of the particles, I select everything, and then at the top where it says filters, I hit filter, I go on the blur, and then motion blur, and that way a lot more things are in focus and all those particles are a little blurred to make it seem like the image was captured while in motion. It just makes things feel more alive. So again, understanding filters are key. Everything so far has been key, so you need to understand them, how to do them, and when to do them. Here I'm just adding more highlights. You create a layer, and this time it's more like light from the white void background hitting the character. So in this case, the color we're choosing is more white than yellow or orange. And it's on a new layer on its own. I'm just going to call it highlight 2 or something, and then trying to hit the character in the parts that we feel it would, especially the shinier parts of the suit. The opacity will be low again as usual, but these things just help the character pop a whole lot more. I do the same for the blue lights emitting from the character's suit. So on the same layer, really, I didn't even change the layer. We're picking a bluer color and we're putting the highlights there. Normally you can actually change the blending mode to a different kind of light blending mode. Here we're using a linear dodge, but you can experiment with the other options you have to see what works best. You're still messing with the blending mode, you're still messing with the opacity accordingly, however you see fit. And in this case, the light from the suit is different from the light from the fire. In some cases you could use a different blending mode, or rather than having a lighter blue, we could have actually gone a more bluey blue, if that makes sense. But I think this still works. Then here we have more filter magic. You can actually select every layer in the layer window, duplicate it, and then merge it, keep it at the top. That way all the layers have been flattened on one layer. Then you select the whole canvas. Go up to filters, blur, Gaussian blur, do like 30, all on this new flattened merged layer. Then change the blending mode to lighten, and then reduce the opacity to below 50. And it will do this really nice, soft, anime looking effect. You want to take it a step further, select everything again, merge it, put it at the top, then select the whole canvas. On the side, right next to the layer where it says channel, you pick one of the colors, red, green, or blue, while all the colors are visible. Make sure the whole canvas is selected, then Command T. That way you're selecting everything on that layer, and you just shift it a little bit to one side. And what this will do is give a really nice, subtle 3D effect. The more you shift it, the more you get to see the 3D effect. Almost like wearing 3D glasses. Pretty cool. Another thing you can do is we duplicate this 3D effect that we've done. We make the previous one invisible. That way we can always go back to it if we need to. It's kind of like a good practice thing for digital art. And then on this duplicate that we've created, we create a mask for it. Then hit Quick Mask. What this does is we'll create this little white box right next to it. And for this white box, you kind of want to use only white and black on the canvas at this point. And since everything is white, everywhere you cover with black on the canvas will kind of make it invisible to see what's underneath it based off of how the layers are stacked. Now all the places that we put in black with an airbrush, so it has like soft edges, but all the parts we put in black, those parts are not going to have the 3D effect based off of how the layers are stacked. And that way only parts of the drawing have the 3D effects, almost like it's out of focus, right? You can do the same thing with just flat out blurring the edges, where you have like a blurred part of the illustration and then some parts not blurred, so we can focus on certain parts that you as the creator want the viewer to focus on. Kind of like how we did with the motion blur and the particles from the fire. And you just keep playing with it until you get what you want. If you want to go another step further, more sauce, duplicate, merge, throw it at the top. Make sure you select the whole canvas, and at the top on filters, you just go to noise. 10 is usually fine, and then you hit OK. And then this gives a really nice grainy effect to the whole drawing. All of these are optional. All these little tricks, tips, all these things are optional. You do not need to do all of them. But depending on your art style and what you want to create, you can do a mix and match of each. And after that, you're done. Understanding and mastering some of these secret tips to a degree are a good foundation for you to build on while going ahead and creating your digital art. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. For the 2.5 people that made it to the end of this video, thank you. Hit the like. Holy Ghost, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. Turn on all notifications. The character you see me drawing here is from one of our Saturday Brunch series called Henshin. Highly recommend you guys go check out Henshin in Saturday Brunch issue 1. You can check out all of our magazines, Saturday AM for the Shonen series, Saturday PM for the Seinen series, and Saturday Brunch for the Josei series. All on our app for free. The latest issues of all the magazines are free, so you can go read Brunch right now, read Henshin right now. Also publishes my manga Apple Black. Links to everything you could possibly need will be in the description below. If you're new to what we do, you can read the starter guide inside the app. It has everything you need to know, including character profiles of our core series. The list goes on. And that's it, guys. Check out more of my other videos that teach how to draw. Basic tutorials are going to be making a comeback. Some of my other fun videos, and there's more to come, so stay tuned for that. Please check it out. Please subscribe. Hope you guys are having a solid holiday, being safe. It's Whyt Manga, and I'm out.